Good morning and welcome to Inside Tennessee. I'm your moderator, John Becker. We're going to get to a micro and macro discussion on supply chain and also what the tariffs are doing in terms of impact to small businesses in East Tennessee. And let's start there. I had a conversation earlier this week with a small business focused on building model trains. Here's part of that conversation.
Well, John, my name is Shane Wilson. I'm with Scale Trains out of Cleveland, Tennessee. And we are a company that makes model trains. And we have a team in Tennessee as well as spread across the country. We have 20 people here in Tennessee and 8 across the United States. And what we do here is we do the research. We do the put together a research package. We'll send that to our factory in mainland China who does the design work. Our team works back and forth to make sure the designs match the real trains in the real world. Then we go to tooling. And then, of course, we continue to work through that process. We'll get test shots, and then eventually we'll make the product announcement. And about 9 to 12 months later, that product is actually delivered to us where we distribute it here out of Tennessee to hobbyists around the globe.
And what are the tariffs right now doing to your business?
Well, the tariffs right now are really challenging. It has changed a lot almost day by day over the last week or so. And as of today, the tariff is at 145%. And it's really making us make some pretty difficult decisions. We were in a very good growth mode. New hires, we moved into a new building 2 years ago, and it actually increased the square footage 10 times. And so now we're looking at what can we do to delay shipments so that hopefully maybe this time will pass sooner than later. But, there's the big challenge as a small business is cash flow. And there's got to be money in the bank to pay the bills, to pay our people. Their families are counting on us for their income, to pay their mortgages and those things. And we can only hold off so long while we wait in hopes that the tariff will either come down or go away. Before everything started in February, there was no tariff on the model train or actually the hobby and toy industry. And the tariff going into China at that time was 7.5%, and they have a VAT tax of 13%. So, the total there is 20.5%. So the thing that we're looking for is fair trade, right? I mean, the 20.5% versus 145%. And we understand the politics of manufacturing in China. And there are places we could look at in the world to go to. But the challenge there is when you have to either absorb that tariff, which is absolutely impossible. That for us as a small business will run in the millions of dollars this year. And so we, looking at trying to absorb that, we can't. And now we look at, do we pass that cost along to our customer? We do have in our industry, a pretty unique business model. We do things a little differently. It's kind of like what Apple does with an iPhone, where in our industry, we'll make a product announcement. We don't take payment at that time. And then when that product comes in several months later, we bill the customer. So we've already announced products that have a price point, and now we're looking to go back. We have something that's due this spring that we announced at $310, and now we're looking at maybe a $450 to a $500 price. Don't think many of our customers would be real happy about spending that. And the scary part is almost 100% of that shipment is fully sold. So we're counting on that money, of course, to run our company. We would love to bring manufacturing back to the United States. The challenge is several challenges there. One is in our world, it's a very specialized skill. The model trains that we make are highly detailed. They're of high quality, require a lot of hand labor. There's no robotics. It's not like you're making an iPhone where it's making the same widget over and over and over again. So there's a lot of labor involved. And also there's no supply chain here in the United States. You have to have somewhere to go get the electric motors, the small parts, the metal pieces, the wheels, all of those types of things. So you have to create that supply chain as well. And, it's not cheap to start a factory because there is none here. It's millions of dollars to start a new factory, and you're going to be out of production for several months. You have to have the ability to weather that time that you're out of production. And the last thing is, we estimate, and we've looked at it several times, if we were to make our products here, we would look at a 3 to 4 times price increase. So that same model that I just talked about being $300 made here is $900 to $1,000. And we're already having people tell us if we raise our prices to that $400 or $500 price point that they're going to cancel orders with us. So we know that they're not going to pay $1,000 for the models that we make today. One of the things I think that's really important is the effect is way more than just scale trains. I've been on the phone with several of our folks in our industry over the last week or two, and we're all looking at ways that we can join together as a voice and come and really present our case to folks. We understand that this really needs to be about fair trade, and we want to be fair in that process. And so, as a whole industry, if we don't see tariffs come down soon, I think there's a lot of small businesses in our same situation that this industry might not exist in the next few weeks or few months.
We appreciate that perspective from Mr. Wilson, who is a small business owner here in East Tennessee. Joining our conversation now, my colleague John North, veteran journalist. And we also are pleased to welcome Tom Goldsby, UT Haslam College of Business Supply Chain Management. We are so appreciative of your expertise.
Certainly, John. Thanks for having me. Appreciate
Absolutely. And as we get started, we're going to talk more in the coming minutes about this, but just give our viewers an idea of the UT supply chain management program and just how many people you're producing.
Yeah, no, certainly. Supply chain management has been a fun, exciting field at the University of Tennessee for a number of years. In fact, it's often regarded as the largest program on campus, one of the largest supply chain programs anywhere in the world. We have about 1,700 undergraduate students majoring in the topic, and then about another 500 graduate students that are seeking master's and PhD degrees in the field. We're also one of the largest faculty as well. I think we are about 26 full-time faculty now.
So that is why he is in, and John is going to lead us off in the next block here with our conversation, talking about the macro and micro impact of the tariffs. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Supply chain management expert Tom Goldsby, our guest from the UT College of Business, the Haslam College. John North, your question.
So Shane Wilson's story is kind of the perfect anecdotal way to get into a discussion, which actually is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. We've been talking, the three of us, off camera about this, the potential enormous impact we're talking about, that you have small, as John said, an individual business person who may not be able to continue working if these tariffs continue, and then you have this massive sort of global stage. Can you tell us when are we going to start to see the effects of this, or are we already? And what I mean is, I know the president said, okay, I'm going to put a 90-day set-aside on all of this, except for things like China, and I think there's a 10%. How quickly, or are we already starting to see the fear and sort of the reverberations from this?
I feel that I've been taking part in therapy sessions nonstop.
Ground's been moving.
That's right. And really it predates Liberation Day,
right.
April 2. That was certainly the big announcement, and the reciprocal tariffs were introduced to all of us at that time. But we really need to go back to Trump 1.0 if we could for a moment. And I think that's when things first started to get set into motion, in that tariffs were introduced in early 2018. And that really rocked many businesses to their core. And so many, like Mr. Wilson, do have production supplies in China, almost exclusively in many cases. And that led many companies to realize maybe having all their eggs in that one basket in China was perhaps not such a good move moving forward. And so we started to hear about a policy called China Plus One among companies. And the idea was that they were still going to maintain a considerable foothold in the Chinese marketplace because it does offer so many advantages and capabilities, as Mr. Wilson pointed out. However, maybe it's worthwhile to go looking for another locale. And in many instances, it was low-cost country sourcing in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, India, and also looking to our neighbor to the south, Mexico. And so we're really more than 7 years into the overtures of these wheels turning and creating more of a portfolio, if you will, of sourcing locations for materials as well as product.
The Biden administration kept the China tariffs, correct?
Right.
Maybe even upped them a little bit?
That's right. That's right. In select sectors, I think most of us will be aware that electric vehicles, Chinese are moving very aggressively in the production of low-cost EVs. Also semiconductors and advanced chips. We were very concerned about bringing those operations stateside. And so we had the Inflation Reduction Act that came about during the Biden administration, bilateral infrastructure bill as well, those pieces of legislation that really helped to suggest, hey, maybe selectively we need to bring some choice production back to the United States. But you're right, the Biden administration did maintain those tariffs that many companies thought perhaps if we just wait this out, change of administration, but that didn't happen. They got sustained, and as you pointed out, in some sectors they were actually inflated.
When we look at the small company like Mr. Wilson's company, I want to turn it into a discussion too about larger companies as well, because they often can look 3 to 5 years beyond the immediate few months because they have the ability to take in more supply and at least store it until things sort of shake out, if you will. But what is that perspective right now from people who are in larger companies, the Walmarts of the world?
Well, everyone, small all the way to the behemoths like Walmart, are looking about what to do in the here and now. And dare I say, they're looking for stability, right? Supply chain professionals tend to be expert problem solvers. So if you will just lay out the provisions that they can expect to have for the balance of this year into next year, and dare I say, into the indefinite future, they would welcome that. And that's when you might start to see some of those investments that we would all like to see in the United States. We would all like to see manufacturing happen on a greater basis. Right now it's roughly 10% of our GDP, less than 10% of our employment. We would love to have more of those well-paying jobs in the United States, but we need some consistency in mission, purpose, and policy in order to provide that sort of confidence that they'll make those really big bets.
And just an example, Americans seem to have demonstrated they're willing to pay more for jeans that are made in the U.S. Maybe they are willing to pay $20, $30, $40 more for a pair of jeans that they know is American made versus something that's made overseas. Are there individual thresholds for products that you've seen in your work where you say, this could work for product X, but not product Y?
It's such an individual product by product basis, and we have to look at the economics that we have. And as Mr. Wilson pointed out, do we even have the capability as well as the capacity to bring those production operations to American shores? And dare I say, it does tend to happen where we have, bear with me for a moment, an academic term, high value to touch. Okay, so if we're talking about automobiles, aerospace, some computers, robotics, those technologies tend to have very, very high sticker prices and not a great deal of touch, if you will. And we've looked at ways to maybe introduce robotics that can maybe reduce the touch or economize on the labor. And to the extent that that robotization comes about and we see it, we can start to see it perhaps come into apparel and some lower cost goods, but that doesn't do much for the employment situation.
We've got to take another quick break on Inside Tennessee. John North will lead us when we come back on this Sunday morning. Happy Easter. We're back on this Sunday morning talking about the impact of the tariffs we've seen by the Trump administration and just what this looks like days, weeks, and months from now. John?
At the end of the last block, we were talking about labor, and that means employment. And whether people realize it or not, we're actually in a pretty good employment situation in the United States right now. We're close to full employment. Tennessee maybe arguably is even better than the national average. But this theory about, well, we want to bring more jobs to the United States, that's a fabulous thing to do. We're already sort of snug in terms of the employment pool. So it raises the question, well, who's going to do the jobs or something like that? Is that correct?
That has been one of the greatest struggles we've had in all of supply chain management in recent years. Fortunately, it means great employment opportunities for our graduates, but for frontline workers, we've had a great shortage. And we experience it, everything from the restaurants that can't find the staff to serve and wash the dishes and so forth. And there is the real concern about manufacturing and distribution operations also running into a brick wall. As you point out, we're at near full employment. And so if those operations were to come back to the U.S., where would that labor come from? I'm keen to also point out that we have more than doubled the number of workers that we have in logistics and distribution in the United States over the last 10 to 12 years. And that's thanks in large part to Amazon and other companies with last mile delivery methods and so forth. It generally takes about twice as many people to process the same amount of product when it's broken up in a pallet and delivered in individual eaches to the household door. So we're already very much struggling to find that labor in the provision of delivering products. So if we were to make the product stateside, we're not quite sure where that labor would come from.
I guess sort of addressing this question of the tariffs and if that's the road we're going to go down, that's worth a little bit of a discussion about how we have evolved and how institutional our current way of doing things has become. Starting, you know better than I do, I don't know, 80, 100 years ago, we started moving more toward this sort of international global trade, not having very high tariffs because we wanted to promote commerce internationally. We have been doing this for decades, and now the leader in the White House is like, we're going to change the way we play football. And that's fine if that's where we're going to go, but then it sounds like once you get down that road, it's hard to change course. And it's not something where you can just snap your finger and, well, we'll go back to 2022, say, if we get a new leader in 2028 or what have you. What about that?
Well, I tell my students that the globalization toothpaste is out of the tube. And despite how much we'd like to put it back in the tube, it's going to be really, really hard.
Maybe a little messy on the counter.
Messy,
but
I don't want to say impossible, and it can also be very expensive to do it. And we have to question whether we want to do it with protectionist measures, as we see with tariffs, or through incentives. Is it going to be a stick or a carrot approach? And this administration is choosing to take the carrot. Take the carrot away and apply the stick. This is the stick. That's right. That's right. Now, meanwhile, in the previous administration, we saw the CHIPS Act as an example. And it's very expensive, and you do choose winners and losers. But dare I say, Intel very much likes the CHIPS Act, and TSMC, the world's largest producer of advanced microprocessors, and chips, they love the CHIPS Act.
And explain that for our viewers who may not be familiar with it, because it's worth that background.
Right. So the CHIPS and Science Act passed about halfway through the Biden administration, maybe a little bit past the midpoint. And again, I'm keen to point out it was bilateral, right? And so both houses of Congress determined that it was a worthwhile investment to make in the production, distribution, and use of advanced semiconductors. And I think as of last tally I saw, we've invested as a nation about $54 billion. We've committed $54 billion thereabout to helping these world-leading chip makers to establish shops in the United States or to expand existing fabrication plants. However, this is the interesting point, more than $450 billion in private investment has followed. Okay, so that's the carrot approach of saying there are select industries that we feel are ultra critical to the United States prosperity and security, and we need to double down in those areas. Now, clearly, we can't do it, unfortunately, in model trains and help Mr. Wilson in that regard, right? But we can maybe choose some of the most vital technologies and do that. Also, the Inflation Reduction Act set a lot of provisions out for electric vehicles, EV batteries, and that was something that was very much welcomed here in the I-75 corridor of Tennessee and Kentucky, where we're hoping to produce those automobiles and batteries.
And you've also got that giant plan out west, I think, that Ford's going to build, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you needed that, if I understand it, and again, you're smarter about this than I am, you needed that legislation in order to sort of push that industry forward and get it going. Otherwise, people are like, it's not worth it for me.
Well, I'll just counter that with an approach where business people don't know what to expect. And really, to make investments, it doesn't even have to be of the scale of semiconductors. It can be of the scale of automobiles or turbochargers or transmissions or model trains. You know, we need that consistency in vision, we need the consistency in policy, and that will tend to, again, elevate the confidence. To the extent that there's also some form of incentive, that would bolster the cause too.
And we hear a lot about short-term pain for some long-term gain. In the remaining couple of minutes we have, what would you say about that and the explicit signs you'll see and we will see in the short term in terms of pain that we might get in the long term?
Well, with regard to the current tariff approach, the supply chain professionals with whom I speak are looking for silver lining. It's not abundantly clear where that is. And we would, again, have to sustain protectionist measures for a very long time for global supply chains to reverse course.
Decade?
Perhaps. And it really, again, depends upon the nature of the product. Again, if we go back to that value to touch ratio I described earlier, there are some areas that might make a little more sense to do it sooner. And then we also keep an eye on automation and how that might alter the equation a bit.
You speak to colleagues internationally. I know that. You've been out of country to address forums and what have you. What are your colleagues saying about what's going on right now in the United States?
Just scratching their heads trying to make sense of it, and we explain here in the United States we're trying to make sense of it as well. We really don't have much to offer in the way of explanation just yet. You know, as a case in point, we had our Supply Chain Forum event last week, which brought a lot of our supply chain partners to campus, and a senior supply chain leader was expressing to us that he was in a meeting that lasted all morning where they were making plans for what to do in light of the tariffs, and they emerge from the meeting and learn that the tariff scheme has changed, and they then go back into the same meeting room for the balance of the afternoon to draw out some new scenarios.
Professor Goldsby, we appreciate your expertise and that context on what is an ongoing conversation. By the time this airs, it may be different.
Who knows?
We appreciate it. Thanks very much. We're back with our talk around right after this. Welcome back on this Easter morning. Our old friend Dennis Francis would say, what's the gossip? And he would have been burning up the phones this week tied to the Knox County trustee.
Yeah, that's right. It would have been a busy conversation for Dennis. He would have enjoyed every bit of it. We actually started hearing a couple weeks ago that the state comptroller's office was in the city-county building looking specifically at Justin Biggs's office. He's the county trustee. It's an elected position. He's in his first term. They're sort of that office is kind of the banking office, if you will, handles the money. They were asking a lot of questions. They were there for multiple days. And then this past Monday, Biggs kind of came out and said, well, I have a statement I would like to give about all of this.
And he promised transparency.
He promised transparency, and he talked about his dedication to doing what's right, et cetera, et cetera. He's also the office holder under which it would appear things were going on. The comptroller's office clearly was alerted that there were some questionable things going on. We understand things like usage of some vehicles and whether there was personal usage, also travel expenses. We've got records. Third, there may have been some curious sort of land transactions. He fired an employee specifically, didn't say who that was, but we know that person's name, and that's somebody who came on board with him after he was elected and took office in 2022.
More reporting to come on this, John, but in the minute we have left, some context here. This has been an office with some trouble in its history.
Yeah, it's sort of hard to believe. I mean, the first time it happened, everybody went, oh, well, but actually, we've had two prior trustees in Knox County within the last roughly 20 years who ran afoul of the law because of their own conduct or behavior, led to criminal investigations. Then we had sort of a lull, if you will, with Ed Schaus when nothing really happened. Ed left office. Biggs took over, and now we have the comptroller conducting an investigation.
Whatever happens, having the comptroller in your office, it's serious.
No bueno, as you like to say. It is not a good thing. You don't want to have a knock on your door from the comptroller's office because they have a lot of power and they make reports and they talk to the DA.
John North, we appreciate the reporting and the perspective as always. Again, we wish you a happy Easter, and we hope you have a terrific week. We hope to see you back here next week on Inside Tennessee.